Hi, welcome to Mediation and Beyond's YouTube channel. This is Colleen O'Neil here. I'm super excited today. I have a very special guest, I believe, because she speaks to the most relevant pieces of any divorce, which is our children. So I have the good fortune and pleasure of having Rosalind Sedacca, a certified divorce coach. She's the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, and she's a divorce and co-parenting coach. And she's the author of the acclaimed ebook, How Do I Tell the Kids About Divorce? Create a storybook guide to preparing your children with love. And really, if you haven't even heard of it, if you haven't gotten it, it's a must read before you tell your children, or how to go about telling your children about divorce. So we'll learn later how to get a copy of that. So Rosalind provides her coaching services, her e-courses, and other valuable resources on divorce and co-parenting issues at her website, childcentereddivorce.com. That's childcentereddivorce.com. So Rosalind, thanks so much for coming today. I'm super excited to have you here. So I appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing your insights around divorce. So when we get started, I just want to ask you a little bit about what got you into this field of work just in general.
Well, it was my own divorce. I had a marriage that was going sour for me, and I stayed in it for many, many years, longer than I wanted to, because I had a son. And by the time he was 11, I knew I had to get out because he was starting to show signs of stress in the family. There was conflict, even though I knew better. My husband and I would be having fights around him, and all children tried to mediate, try to calm things down and fix the matter. And of course he couldn't. And I realized that I had to do something. He was starting to get tension headaches and other things, and I knew I had to finally make the move. So it was the hardest decision I made in my life at that time. But I got the divorce, and then I was overwhelmed with the anxiety about how do I break the divorce news to my son, who's very close to both his father and to me. And I knew about the emotional and psychological implications of all of this and wanted to ease the trauma for him. And I stayed awake for sleepless nights. And finally, 4 in the morning one night, I came up with an idea that ultimately became a storybook that I put together with family photos and texts that I wrote, and I presented it to him. And it turned out to be such a good idea that a couple of years later, I put it together into How Do I Tell the Kids About the Divorce? Mm-hmm. And that's because ultimately, it was really when my son became a young adult, and he came to me one day in his early 20s, and he said, you know, Ma, you and Dad really did a good job with the divorce, because most of my friends whose parents divorced either hate their parents or are very angry at them. And I think you guys were great. And I let out a sigh of relief, because I was holding on to so much guilt for so long. And I finally realized that I had things that I could share with other people that were really valuable. And ultimately, I founded the Child-Centered Divorce Network and put that book together, and it all fell into place for me and for the people who I am serving.
And so the feedback that you've gotten on the book, I assume it's probably been as positive as your own experience.
Absolutely. Families really get great value, because the children use that book as a resource that many of them will bring from home to home long after the divorce. They'll add their own photos, and they'll continue. It gives parents a feeling of continuum and explains to children that life will go on, even though this is a very difficult time that we're going through. There's going to be more chapters in the life of our family, and we remain a family, and that's very positive. It also keeps both parents on the same page. I have 6 psychotherapists who contribute to the book, and all of our messages are about the fact that when both parents are focused entirely on the well-being of the children first, the other issues get resolved, and the children can get through a divorce without any problems. It's when conflict remains and the children are exposed to it that the emotional and psychological impact gets more and more dramatic and difficult to deal with. So the book starts families on the right side, and it's much easier to go through divorce when you already understand this and are more aligned into mediation or collaboration and other non-aggressive forms of divorce, keeping out of the courts, keeping away from litigation, and keeping your children aware that both mom and dad are still my mom and dad and always will be.
Well, yeah, that's, you know, in my practice, much like yourself, working, obviously we both work with divorced couples, and that, you know, the divorce is about the marriage. The parents are not divorcing the children, you know, so it's just the marriage that's changing. But, and I love what you're saying, because I say the same thing. It's that you're still a family, like only one mom, only one dad. And I like that the kids have something tangible that's positive about the family dynamic that's kind of changing and evolving.
Yes, and most important about using the storybook concept that's prepared in advance is that both parents have something like a script that they can follow. So the whole family is reading the storybook together. Parents don't forget some messages that are really important. It's said in a voice and tone that both parents agree with right from the start. Neither one of them is judging or pointing a finger at the other one, and it's in a child's age grade level, because we have fill in the blank templates. So the book is very customized to the family, but the message is written by me so that they know that they're getting it right. And the kids can reread it over and over again in the days, weeks, and even months after the initial conversation, reminding them of the important points they need to hear.
And do you encourage families with the use of your book to parents to do that together? Like to sit down with the children?
Who prepares the book, it can be done together or by one parent.
Okay.
But what's important is that both parents are looking at the book, agreeing about the message, feeling comfortable, and feeling that this is a message that mom and dad can present together. And we definitely encourage parents to talk together, get the kids together, regardless of the ages of the children, sit down as a family, have that conversation, and mom and dad are nodding in agreement. Yes, this is what mom and dad are talking about. This is what we've decided. We don't know the answer to all the questions. That's not important right now. What's important right now is understanding the big picture, and that is that our family is changing its form, but we're always going to be a family. Mom and dad will always be your parents. We'll always love you. And this is about change and not about blame. That's a huge piece of the puzzle, because children can understand the concept that change happens in life. We change grades in school, we change our hairstyles and our fashion, we change sports and teams, and all kinds of things change. This is a change in our family, but a change doesn't have to be bad. And if both parents are together in alignment and agreeing about the message, then children can accept this and move on. If one parent is pointing the finger and saying, this terrible thing wouldn't have been happening if it wasn't for your father's affair or your mother being an alcoholic, that takes it to a whole other level. And that's when we get into the drama that is so unnecessary for children.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because I think you bring up a really good point, because it sounds, I mean, it'd be amazing when I think the parents that can do this, gosh, the legacy they leave for their children is, it's priceless. But the parents who are not together and aren't able to, they just keep doing this or button heads, can one parent still do this regardless of having both parents on the same page? Or would that be confusing, because you'd have one parent with this kind of template, which is really a healthy template, right? And then you have the other parent who's, you know, what you're saying is, you know, this wouldn't have happened if your father didn't cheat, but the father still would like to use this template. What do you think of that? Or do you think that's confusing for the kids?
Well, it's going to be confusing for the kids regardless. And what you want to do is, as much as possible, take the high road and do what's right and what's best for you and for the children, because a healthy message is best for the children. So you're doing it yourself and relaying the message that this is a change in our family and that mom and dad both are your parents and we both love you and care about you. And things are going to be okay and we're going to work it out is always good for kids to hear. If the other parent is negating that and bad-mouthing, of course, that's going to be difficult and challenging for the children. But kids pick up and they're looking at you as role models. So you were being a role model for your children at a time that's very difficult, and you were showing them the way to behave as a mature, responsible adult and giving them the messages they should hear, versus hearing something else on the other side when they visit the other parent. And they will pick up on where they feel more aligned and attuned, nevertheless. So it's always difficult when you don't have both parents understanding. And that's why we try so hard in articles and blog posts and webinars and in the book itself to explain to parents, regardless of how you may personally feel about it, will work by keeping the focus always on our children, on our children, on our children, and having conversations about we and us and our family, again, helps bring the attention in that direction. And there are many questions I like to use in the coaching process.
Mhm.
And one good question for all parents to ask themselves, because the funny thing is we get so caught up in the divorce that we forget that divorce is just a small section of time. And then the future is co-parenting after divorce. You have the rest of your life to be a co-parent. And your children are watching you every step of the way and learning from you. So one is remembering that you're a role model always,
Mhm.
and that they're learning from what you do more than what you say. It's not about lecturing, it's about showing them. But
Mhm.
the big question to ask is, would I still be making this parenting decision if we were still married? So if something comes up with discipline or overnights or other things that are routine parenting issues that happen, or one of the children gets sick, and how do we make a decision with the health crisis? If your answer is the same as it would be had you still been married, that's a clean response. If your answer would have been different, but now you're saying something because you want to hurt your ex, get back at them, and there's some other motive, then you are totally askew, and your children are going to be hurt in the aftermath of all of this. So it's a good guide to really ask yourself, is this the parenting decision I would have made regardless? And that'll keep you on a clean line, because you need each other as parents. Life is difficult, and the more you can co-parent in alignment, the better for everyone in the family. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen in all families, as you well know, because you're in the trenches dealing with the difficult cases when they have the aftermath. But my force and focus is to catch families as early on as possible and get them into the right track, because once they are, it's so much easier to stay in that track than to get thrown off by a litigated high conflict divorce and then suddenly be thrown into the streets and say, now what do? We hate each other more than we did before the divorce. It's much more complicated.
Well, you know, my practice is named Mediation and Beyond, because it's really more the mediation's a very small piece. The divorce process is very small, but it's that beyond piece that you're
Yes.
speaking to, because you were co-parents when you were married. Co-parenting, I don't even like the term in divorce, because that's what you do when you're married and you're in your family. You're co-parenting together. So it's just a continuation of your parenting, even in the divorce. But I think a lot of people just think of, oh, we have to get along parenting because we're divorced. No, you have to get along parenting because you created the children. Whether you're married or divorced is kind of irrelevant, but it's that beyond piece that I think is so significant, which is what your book alludes to. And you said you had some e-courses. What are some of the coursework that a parent who may come to your site might sign up for?
Well, I have a 10-hour program on co-parenting for conflicted parents. So it's actually anger management for co-parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a program. Sometimes it's court ordered, and other times it's because one or both parents realize that they really could use the help. And it's gives them 10 full hours of information and guidance to get them to be more aligned and understand the consequences of dealing with anger and letting that run you rather than you taking responsibility for your life, and how difficult it makes life for everyone around you. So that's one program. I have an ebook on co-parenting effectively that's right off of my website. It's short, but it has steps and processes so that people can follow those processes, answer questions, and find themselves moving ahead and understanding more of the co-parenting process. And it includes information about how children react to divorce at different ages and stages, because that's something very important. When you're talking to your 5-year-old versus your 15-year-old, obviously there's a huge difference in the way you're going to discuss it, and you want to be prepared. And it's very important to understand reactions of children at different ages, because we can't expect all of our children to behave the same way. And even children who are the same age will have different reactions because of their personality differences. And we want, the most important thing, and I'm sure you tell all of your clients, is to be so perceptive and watch your kids and look for any changes in behavior, because children digest and experience the divorce differently, and some of them will react in a very adverse way and get very upset. And if they're emotionally hurt and harmed, they can get aggressive, start bullying, their grades will change in school, they get very mean-spirited and act out, while other children may turn in and become more and more introspective, more introverted, more quiet. Some will regress into bedwetting and other behavior that you hadn't seen before. And some of them, of course, if it's really dramatic, can turn suicidal because they're so depressed and down. The important thing is for parents to catch any behavior changes really, really early on. And that's why we focus so much in all of my programs on communication skills, learning how to talk to children, learning how to talk to your co-parent. Mastering that on any degree at all is going to be a lifesaver and a big help, because good communication skills will help diffuse tension. And that's what it's all about, diffusing tension with your kids, diffusing tension with your ex, so life can be more harmonious. Life has its own bumps and without divorce. And, you know, adding divorce obviously complicates matters, but we want to make it as smooth a transition as possible. My own son wrote the foreword to my book on how to tell the kids about divorce, talking a bit about his experience when he was 11 years old, and we broke the divorce news to him, and how he was able to move on, because I think he was very fortunate, because both his father and I soon realized that despite differences we had, that we both loved him enough that it made sense for us to discuss things in a mature way, make decisions together, and not put down one another to him. And I'll share a story, a true story that happened at the point when we were just about to break up and separate. My son was 11, and we were having some fight, and while I was moving some things out of the house, and my son was crying, and my husband said to me, "Look what you're doing," because I initiated the divorce. He did not want the divorce. And so I was the bad guy. And he said, "You're destroying the family. Look what you're doing to your child." And my son wiped his eyes and he said, "Daddy, I'm not crying because you're getting a divorce. I'm crying because you're fighting. I wish you'd just stop fighting." And to his credit, my husband got that. And we just kept any conflict away from my son. And obviously you evolve and you grow in the divorce process, and it's not a simplistic thing, and no one is making it seem like it is, but that made all the difference, so that my son was able to get off the school bus in one house or the other. We lived in the same community, so it was just a few miles apart. So his life wasn't disrupted as much as in some other cases. The less you disrupt your children's lives regarding school, regarding friends, regarding access to extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of that is very important. Pets are very important. You want to keep your children's life as same as usual and as positive as usual. And every little thing makes a difference in supporting them so that they're not feeling that the world is being torn apart.
Or that they're put in the middle to have to make all the choices, right?
And we never want to do that. Yes, there are certain huge mistakes that parents make that are common that can be avoided. And one of them is definitely that, putting them in the middle, asking them to make choices. The guilt alone for making a choice for a child, because one way or another, one parent may not be as pleased as the other. And why should a child be put in a position like that? It certainly is not fair for them.
Well, that leads me to one of my questions for you, which I think, you know, I try to figure who's the audience that would be watching this, right? So if I'm that woman or that man that says, you know what, I agree with you, Rosalind, like you're spot on. I'm in unison with you, but there is no way that my partner, my ex-partner and I are going to be on that page. He or she just, that's not where they're headed. That's not the lane they're in right now or where they're at in their lives. How does someone take your guidance, and I think it's just spot on, your guidance, and still apply it to their family life, while I don't want to say honoring, but at least acknowledging that that other person is nowhere near where I am, right?
Yeah.
So what do you tell somebody like that who's kind of watching this, right, you know, in the middle at midnight, laying in bed watching this and trying to figure out what to do?
And that's one of the most difficult questions to answer, because there's no absolute easy way through that. But you do your best. And again, you follow the path that you know is right for your kids. And the kids are seeing the contrast and the difference. So in one house, things may be one way, in another house, the other way. In one house, there may be a lot of bad mouthing of the parent. But in the other house, they're not hearing that. They're not hearing put downs. And the kids may feel more comfortable. They may notice that it's more comfortable and more positive and less intimidating. And it may feel more loving and caring and compassionate in that house. And so while they are powerless to do anything about the differences in the homes, they are more likely to swing into alignment with the parent who is showing them that positive role model. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes children will align with the bully parent, and that leads to the worst facet of divorce, which is parental alienation, when one parent totally wants to make the children hate the other parent. And sadly, that happens in some cases. And this is a very difficult and complex situation. But in many cases, we can explain to the other parent that all we need to do is provide the best level of parenting for our children. And the conversation needs not to be I messages, but us messages and we messages about the children. So we talk about Tommy and Susie, and we just keep the conversations focused always on them, not about I'd like this, I prefer that, my parents want this. That doesn't create the kind of alignment that you want with a difficult co-parent. So if you talk about the fact that Susie and Tommy mentioned they want this, you're more likely to at least get the conversation rolling. I also suggest using the online co-parenting tools. There's one I like in particular called twohouses.com, but there are several that are out there. And what they do is have you put everything in writing to reduce the telephone conflict and the live conversations conflict for families where you drop the kids off and there's going to be a battle reminding you about 3 weeks ago. You don't want to go there. And so if everything is in writing in email format, and that is something where you can have your attorneys or mediators or therapists be able to look in and watch it, it kind of keeps both parents in better behavior mode. And it also keeps you focused on, let's deal with the facts, the details, and get out of the emotions, get out of all the adjectives describing the emotional turmoil that you're going through. And so in its own way, it's another way of just reducing conflict and focusing on what really matters in the relationship, especially when there's minor changes in schedules. And I do want to remind parents that one way to help is to be very cooperative with the other parent. There's going to be changes. Schedules happen, changes happen, accidents happen, life happens. And so when your parent, other parent, comes to you and says, listen, I have to take 2 days off. I didn't expect I have a business trip. Can you take the kids this time and instead of that, and then I'll catch up with you in 2 weeks? Even though it may be an inconvenience and even though it's something that they are not as likely to do, by doing that, you're showing them the way to being cooperative, and they are more likely to do you a favor in response, because ultimately co-parenting is about doing each other favors, because things just don't work out like your parenting plan. And you want to be focused on, sure, I understand, I'll do that for you, will you do this for me? And what's important is that the kids have two mature, responsible parents taking care of them. We know where they are at all times. We know who's taking care of them. That's the important thing.
Yeah, the structure of a parenting plan. I always say in the beginning, it gives you like your legs, your new legs for the family. And so I think structure is really good. But I always tell people, I hope you outgrow this. You know,
Yes.
you need it in the beginning, but as you develop this, that you don't have to be so rigid with it. But right now, it just gives everybody a holding space and a container to be in. But as you grow and do what you're doing, which is basically saying, come together, be the parents that you would have been had you stayed together, right? And
Exactly.
just you know, you
I
maybe
love
don't
that
need that
message.
structure as much.
I love what you're telling your clients. That's absolutely right on, because that's what they have to understand. This isn't a textbook. This is a guidelines for life. But in the beginning, it's wonderful to have some structure. But yes, I love that. I hope you outgrow it, because that's what's important.
Yeah.
Your kids are going to, in 2 years, they're not the same kids as they are today. In 5 years, they're not the same kids. And so you have to be able to go with the flow. They're going to become more and more independent. They're going to have more options and choices in life. And you have to be able to flow with it. And you don't want your kids to be ashamed or embarrassed of one parent or the other, or to have their friends at your house. And you want them to feel that they're welcome and comfortable. And so this is working on your mindset and their mindset, so everyone is feeling good around each other. And there's nothing more tragic than holidays and birthdays and graduations and special events when both parents can't be sitting in a room for 2 or 3 hours to have a wonderful celebration about your children.
Mhm.
I am shocked at the behavior of some parents, because it's the children who paid the price. At weddings and other occasions, it's shameful, and there's no reason on earth to do that. So again, we have to step up and remind ourselves that our children are watching us. How can we tell them how to handle conflict in life when we can't handle conflict in life ourselves?
Yeah, it's that modeling behavior. I mean, we're modeling relationships.
Yes.
You know, and we're modeling how you play in the sandbox together, right? So if you don't like what someone does, you don't just get up and leave. You try to work with that person on, so how can we both play in the sandbox? And I think adults are this exact same way. And kids, they watch. They're like
Yes.
sponges. But I also like hearing, which is what I say too, it's like that parenting plan has to grow as the children grow. So what worked at 5 isn't going to work at 10. What works at 10 isn't going to work at 15.
Yes.
It has to grow. And if your child wants to do a sleepover, it's not personal. Or don't say, why didn't you do it on mom's time? Like, because that wasn't when the sleepover was. That wasn't when the invite was. And learn how not to personalize stuff. So these are great tips for parents, either contemplating it or even in the middle or even after divorce. So maybe they can still continue to tweak what they're doing. They're realizing what they're doing isn't working. So it's really for any stage of the process.
Yes. And there's a couple of other big mistakes that we may want to just address while we're talking in that alignment. One of them is never use your children as messengers between you. It's very convenient to say, tell mommy I'm going to be 2 hours late on Friday night. We can't expect our kids to be messengers. They don't always get it right. Sometimes they have their own agenda and they don't want to get it right. We don't know. But if you're using the co-parenting online scheduling tool, that information is there. No one could miss it or forget it. It isn't fair to burden our children with responsibilities, adult responsibilities. And along with that is we never want them to become our confidants. So we don't want to take our child aside and start telling them issues about the affair and the addictions and the other drama that's going on in our life. And sometimes parents are so despondent and feeling so bad that they reach out, especially to a teenager, because they're available and they seem to understand. But children, even teens, that don't have the brain function and development to really understand the depth of these emotional problems. If they could fix it, then we wouldn't be in the messes we're in, because we would be able to fix it.
Right.
Life is very complex. So the moment you start talking to your children as a confidant rather than as a parent, you rob them of their childhood and move them into another level. Suddenly they're little adults. At 8 or 18, it still affects them. And I know personally, because I grew up in a family that should have divorced. They stayed together for the sake of the children because it was another generation. And I grew up with conflict and tension my whole life. It created a lot of emotional turmoil for me. And one of the worst mistakes my mother made, and again, she did it innocently, she didn't know any better, but she started confiding in me about my father when I was 6, 8, 10, 12, years and years and years of her using me as her therapist.
Right.
And I became a little adult way before my time. It's a criminal thing to do to your children. So you want to be very aware and cautious about that. And you want to make sure that you never let your children make choices and decisions that should only be made by adults. Because again, the guilt of the responsibility is a burden on their shoulders. We have to look at our children and remember that they are children. They're not little adults. And they have the right to a childhood. We want them to have the joy and the freedom and make the mistakes that silly children make without the extra burden of trying to fix and handle our divorce. So the more we take the divorce out of their hands and put it in our own hands, seek out professional help and support, and let the kids be kids, the more that grateful they will be when they're grown up adults, and they will thank you as my son did.
Yeah, you know, when you're speaking, I was thinking of all the children and the parents that I've known and I've worked with, and I've seen in my own life that when the child has a birthday and the parents, you know, if they're living in proximity, don't come together and give that child one birthday, and I'll hear parents say, but they, you know, they get 2 parties and they're friends, they get to see their friends twice, and it's like, no, they would like one party where all their friends come, like every other friend that they have who they go to one party, not kind of 2, or pick which friends come to which parties. It's like, you know, asking your child, do you want Johnny at this party, mommy's party, or you want Johnny at daddy's party? Like that's putting too much on children.
Yes, and we just don't understand what it's like for them. We have to put ourselves in their shoes to experience it all. And then I can't stress enough the fact that studies have proven that it's conflict that does the most emotional and psychological damage to children. It's not divorce per se that harms kids. It's the way parents handle the divorce, and conflict is the biggest mistake all parents can make. You have to keep your conflict away from the kids, and that means not only not around them in the same room, but on the phone or in another room, or talking to your neighbor.
On speakerphone
Yes,
while you're driving.
yes. And sitting in the living room and talking to your neighbor and making faces about the ex. All of that, children pick up on it, and it hurts them, and they don't always share with you what they're hurt about, but it hurts, it wounds them, and those wounds become lifelong wounds. And I have a friend and colleague who put together a photographic essay book of young adult children of divorce. So these were late teens and early 20s talking about their experiences. And every one of them talked about the fact that when they were exposed to conflict from their parents, it made them doubt their ability to have healthy relationships in their own lives. It made them afraid to seek out permanent relationships. A lot of them said they'll never marry. And it's a very heartbreaking thing to listen to children of divorce talking about the consequences. And it's wonderful to have that, because you could avoid those consequences. You know it now, and you could give your children the gift of a happy life despite divorce, sometimes even a happier life as a result of the divorce, because getting the kids out of conflict and showing them role models of happier relationships is the best thing we could do for our kids.
Yeah, it's really that modeling of healthy that's the legacy, right? I mean,
Yes.
and the family legacy, which I think it gets lost in the divorce process, because people get into their emotions when emotions are important, but that's not the space to deal with them, right? And as you alluded to earlier, just deal with the problem, deal with the facts, not with the emotions of the problem, right? That's an aside. So I think that's well said and well put. And so just to kind of wrap up, Rosalind, when you're speaking about children and the communication with the parents and about conflict, I mean, there's no way to avoid conflict, right? You're getting divorced, that's conflictual in and of itself in its own way. But when the children ask, and this is probably in your program, I'm sure, but when the children ask parents, well, then if it's not us or it's not me why you're getting divorced, what is it? What is kind of a good answer to that could come from both parents?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the key messages in my book is the first thing is that you are not to blame. And we need to say that to our children again and again in different ways for weeks, months, and even years after the divorce, because children innately feel that maybe if I didn't get a D in my report card, maybe if mom wasn't mad at me last month, this wouldn't be happening. They don't quite understand. And especially when parents are fighting about the kids, which very often happens. It's never the children's fault when parents are fighting about the kids. So what you want to do, and hopefully together, is say none of this is about you. Mom and dad haven't been getting along in our relationship, and we've decided that life would be happier and easier for everyone in the family if we just lived in two different houses. We would still be a family, but when you're with mom, life would be happier. When you're with dad, life will be happier. You'll be away from the conflict and the stress, and we'll all be a happier family, and we could still have the good things will still remain, and the things that are stressful will be eliminated. And that's what mom and dad decided to do. And if both mom and dad could be nodding their heads in agreement that this is our decision and this is what's going to be best for our family, children are very much more likely to accept that and understand it and go with the flow. They're looking for the alignment of the parents. And when parents, one is negating the other, the tension gets picked up by the kids. And then they feel they have to align with one or the other. They have to side with one or the other. And that's a very stressful process. There are no bad guys in this situation. This is just a factor of mom and dad not getting along well enough, and we want to create a peaceful future for everyone, so we'll all be happier ahead. And in many, many cases, it really is a better outcome for the family after the divorce, because that issue is gone. Hopefully the parents learned something from the experience to make better decisions. That's why I have books on relationships and dating after divorce, because we want to make sure that they choose better and healthier. And again, the kids are watching all those decisions you're making and learning from you. So that should be motivation to do it right next time around. And of course, the complications of a blended family is a whole other story, and very complicated, but certainly something that many families are exposed to more and more than ever before. And there's ways of tackling that so that, again, it becomes a positive win-win outcome for everyone.
Well, and that's why, like, that beyond piece of divorce is really, it's everything, because there's so many components to it: the dating, the remarriage, the new forms of communication, setting up structures, keeping an eye, watching our kids, listening to what they're saying, hearing them, seeing them, not just physically, but like emotionally seeing them too. And they are sponges. They absorb everything that we say and we do, and they may be quiet, but they're watching. And I think you've given us, I mean, I could spend hours on here with you just going through everything. So can you share with us, Rosalind, where to get the names of your books again and your stuff, and where they can go and purchase that?
Absolutely. So everything is at childcentereddivorce.com. And if you click on the coaching button or the programs button, you'll see all the ebooks and e-courses that are available there. I also didn't mention I have a 10-hour audio coaching program with workbook, so that people can listen and then use the workbook. And it's an excellent source of co-parenting material that you could listen to at your leisure. But all of that is on the Child Centered Divorce website, including the ebook on breaking divorce news. How do I tell the kids about the divorce?
Okay, that's great. And so everyone, I hope that you really take advantage of all the resources that Rosalind has on her Child Centered Divorce website. Go there, check stuff out. They can also contact you off of your site as well, right? Someone
Yes.
wants to work with you or has questions. So that's also an opportunity.
Absolutely. And Rosalind, ROSALIND, at childcentereddivorce.com will get any message to me.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Rosalind. I look forward to having you on again, because there's such a need and there's so much information about just all aspects of divorce. And I'm just trying to get the word out, and get people informed when they make such a major life decision like this. Like it's huge, it's big, and it can be done in a healthy, meaningful, empowered way for themselves and for their family. So thank you so much. I will see you again. And I hope everyone who's watching, leave us a note or a comment about what your thoughts were. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next show. Thanks so much, Rosalind. Take care.